So Ara Pacis was once in color. Marble statues were painted in antiquity. This is a known fact. The problem is that when you have these painted monuments buried for thousands of years and then they're exposed, the paint is either gone or being exposed to air will rapidly dissipate and disappear. But we have the traces of them, and with all kinds of technology, we can read the signatures, knowing that they were colored. The Ara Pacis is the greatest monument preserved from the Roman period under Augustus, and it's well worth our efforts here today to help to try to reconstruct it. So we'll look at the setting, the monument itself, the issue of color in antiquity, and then how we can read this as a once painted monument. Okay, so we are in the northern Campus Martius. Here are two maps that show us twice then the location of the Ara Pacis along the Via Flaminia, today's Via del Corso, known in antiquity as Broadway, that is Via Lata. And it's, as you can see, it's just south of the Mausoleum of Augustus. Today, the Ara Pacis Museum is next to the Mausoleum of Augustus because the Ara Pacis was found underneath a Renaissance palace. So it was excavated out of the basement and then reassembled next to the Tiber River and the Mausoleum of Augustus in the reign of Mussolini, right? His fascist era was focused on people like Augustus, who was a great model for him because Augustus didn't want to ostensibly say, I'm the king, because you couldn't be the king. The kings had been kicked out to make the republic. So he has as a nice model Augustus, who says, I'm first citizen. I'm first among equals. I'm something else. I'm something new. I'm something different. But the SPQR, the Senate and the people of Rome, that still exists. And of course it didn't. But that was the vocabulary and the role that he was playing as he ushered in a dynasty. And the Ara Pacis, in part, celebrates that dynasty. You can see the southern half of the Campus Martius with the Pantheon and the Theater of Pompey and the Tiber Island and the Theater of Marcella. So this is a very large floodplain, one of the reasons that leads to the burial and disappearance of the Ara Pacis. The floodplain was subjected to the flooding of the Tiber, and many alluvial deposits then ultimately bury this portion of the city. Here's a model of a pristine view of Augustus's Campus Martius. There's a park, there's the Mausoleum of Augustus, there's the Tiber River, there's the Via Flaminia, 220 BC, and then we can see in the distance the original Pantheon, and then off to the side is the Ara Pacis. So we'll see it from two different angles. There's the original Pantheon, probably with a wooden roof next to partial remains of the Saipta, the voting enclosure. And off to the middle on the right is that little cube, is the Ara Pacis. Here it is at the bottom of your screen, next to the sundial, which was brought as a war trophy. This horologium obelisk was brought by Augustus to set up a big public sundial. So it's the gnomon. It's the thing that casts the shadow, right? The horologium. And then there's the Mausoleum of Augustus in the distance. So that's the original location of the Ara Pacis. Here it is up close. You can see there are two different levels of the Campus Martius at this time. A higher level where you have the Via Flaminia, and on the other side toward the river, facing west, is a lower level of the Campus Martius. In fact, when we see the Ara Pacis today in the museum, it's got split levels. It was constructed and reconstructed according to how it was in antiquity. So what is this monument? An altar of peace, celebrating Rome's victory over vanquished foes and the well-being of the emperor. So it's vowed after Augustus came back. He was out of the country for 3 years, shoring up fighting in Gaul and Spain. He comes back on July 4th, and that's when it's vowed in 13 BC. He dedicates it, not by chance, on Livia's birthday, his wife, in 9 BC. So we think about this magnificent monument taking 4 years to build. But this is Roman peace through dominance, Roman peace through treaties that favor it, Roman peace through vanquishing one's foes. But the reality was, it was a period that still faced riots, famine, rebellions, uprisings, conspiracies. Okay, what are the components of it? Well, the bulk of what has our interest from the art historical point of view is the exterior kind of temenos wall, the kind of boundary wall. The altar's inside, and this was unroofed. But the altar's inside where you made the sacrifice to honor the concept, the deity of peace. The Romans venerated all kinds of concepts. We do too, right? You think about how many people make offerings at the altar of beauty or fortune if they're betting, right? Here it's concepts of excellence and concepts of peace and fortitude and strength, and so it goes on and on. More Roman in this concept than Greek. We have mythological panels, and we have a procession of real Romans, and we have a campus scroll work. So a lot of this flourishing vegetal work and flowers, symbols of abundance, fertility. This is what happens when you have peace. That makes up half of every single wall on the exterior. So it's a big concept that's being promoted, and we'll take a look at that too. The mythological panels tie back to Roman myths. Romulus and Remus, the twins, Aeneas, the hero, the prince that escapes the destruction of Troy. His descendants are Romulus and Remus. Roma, the concept of the city as a goddess. And Pax, maybe Venus. We have this one woman that's kind of multivalent, has more than one kind of association, but definitely you would imagine the goddess of peace to be appearing somewhere on the monument. So we have this parsed out. We have people that are identified. On one side, you have one procession divided into two sides of the Ara Pacis temenos wall. They are real people that are identified. We know that it's Augustus. We know that it's his right hand Agrippa. We know that maybe Tiberius is there. Definitely his wife is there, Livia, and lots of little children. So they're the grandchildren. It's a dynastic monument. This is something new in Rome. On the other side, unfortunately, most of the heads are not preserved. You do see heads, but they've been reconfigured in, say, the 18th century. But on this side here, they're pretty much legitimate. And you have priests, you have attendants, you have lictors, these bodyguards. So it really is an extravaganza, and there's nothing so rich in this kind of detail, both historical figures and mythological figures, to this degree in the capital. So it's quite extraordinary. And it was all once painted, which we'll get to. So what would be visible would be little details, like these little kids here with you can see the little guy on the left, he has a little necklace, a bulla, which is an amulet that protects you until you become a young man. You can have the purple stripe of the senators delineated and so forth, the straps of the boots. So there's a lot, the hair color, the eyes. So there's lots of little details that would have highlighted and made this a little more, more like the way that the aesthetic was driven towards. Today we've been kind of brainwashed, from the time of the Renaissance and the collectors and this aesthetic of the nice, pure, crystalline marble. But the reality was that all these details were covered in paint. But here is our Aeneas scene making a sacrifice. There's a little shrine in the distance, and attendants, and a pig at the bottom left. Here is part of the procession with all the heads that are added during restoration. But we pivot down, and we see this lovely acanthus scroll work. We see all of these details. So there's so much more going on at the Ara Pacis. So much of the surface area is covered with allegorical meaning. It's not just the people. And the inside now, looking at some representations of offerings of ox skulls and dried flowers that are strung up as garlands, kind of as eternal, permanent stone versions of what would have been actually in the sanctuary from donors. And in the center, already preserved, is the altar itself. And we do have fragments of different figures and so on. We think it was actually lined with images of the different provinces that Rome had conquered. Here are the stairs leading up, right to the altar. So there's some decorations there of a procession of the Vestal Virgins, sacrificial animals. But this is the actual altar itself, unroofed. And then the decoration, the main decoration, is on the exterior temenos wall. So color and antiquity, here we go. There are pigments and there are dyes. And they're derived from minerals, they're derived from vegetal matter and animal matter. And then you basically make adhesives with animal glue or wax or dissolve in water. So let's run through and really consider them. This is why the paint doesn't exist anymore. It comes off, it disappears because it's all organic, right? It's not based on our paints of today with these forever chemicals and so forth. So white, chalk white is calcium carbonate. Lead white is lead plus vinegar. Black can come from carbonized wood or bone, oil sometimes. Red is red ochre. Yellow is yellow ochre. Purple, we know they cook the murex shells. They cook the little sea snail inside the murex shell. Orange is basically arsenic. And then, I threw in here and there. I mean, some of these materials occur all over the world, and sometimes we have the ancient sources like the Outer telling us the best stuff comes from Pozzuoli. The best stuff comes from by the Red Sea. So we have great, bits of information from, in particular, Pliny the Elder. Malachite you grind up. Egyptian blue is the first synthetic color. So copper, calcium, and silica. So it's a combination. Quite interesting. Indigo blue is from a plant. Purple is from the murex sea snail. So, it's a really interesting mix of material. And these were huge businesses. And in fact, a lot of these are going to be used right through the Renaissance. And you have, it's only in recent times that we have, these synthetic versions of these colors. But this is the color. This is what we have to imagine, that industry of getting these materials, and then the artist has it to apply to the sculpture, the relief work that had just been completed on the Ara Pacis. These things are just some details. This is Altar 4. This is an old version of something that they have. I've worked with them before. They're wonderful people. I know the company real well. But these are, some examples from a model that is just showing you then what the dynamic would actually be, right? And again, we're looking at a computer model. We're not looking at real color on real marble. Real color on real marble, if you've ever seen it in a museum when it's preserved, it's pretty awesome, right? It doesn't look, you see these models in color and they're always using these, plaster casts and so forth. And there's a big one at the Met recently. The Germans did a whole series of them. It looks tacky, it looks bad, it looks awful, but that's because they're not using the real material. If you see the paint, when it is well preserved, like the famous, I should have put it up here, the Mithraeum relief that's in from San Stefano Rotondo, that's in the Museo delle Terme, is pretty awesome. I think it looks much better than computer model reconstruct. But you do see that it was really, you could see a lot of these tails off the get-go versus the whitewash, as it were, of all the stones. So really the tails pick out, figures stand out more, it's more legible. This is a little better, more detailed kind of model. So like a lithograph, but you can see these are estimates, these are approximations, because the paint isn't really well preserved on most of the panels. This is a mine that's been exposed for a very long time. It's been cleaned, it's been treated. So, we don't have as good a thing as if we pulled it out of the earth today. If we pulled it out of the earth today, we'd be doing a much more scientific analysis and get a much better, I think, clue as to where the color was. But this is an approximation. And they actually do occasionally, I don't think they've done it for a while now, they used to bathe it with light, to put the colored light on the reliefs to give you a sense. But depending on the director, I ask the director, why don't you do it all the time? Why don't you do it once on the hour? Oh no, we don't want to enforce the idea that this is the way it was, because it's just an approximation. just an approximation. Just say it's an approximation. No, but we don't want to have it reinforced that people think that this is how it was. So that was my conversation in the past with the past director. But I think it would be great to do it like, once on the hour, once on the half hour, for people to see for 5 minutes. Oh, this is giving an idea of what once was, more or less. Just understand that this is just a scientific estimation, based upon research and so forth. But this is the sort of things that we get. We get purple gowns. We get the paludamentum of Mars. We get the purple stripe of the senator, because that's the Senate, the people of Rome, with Roma on the bottom left corner. So I think it'd be well worth it. Anyways, just some details then. And I think it's fun that then we can envision from these studies what once was and what the ancient world once was. It was very colorful, as the frescoes were colorful, as the mosaics are colorful. We would have had these lovely acanthus scrolls and figures that were teeming with a grand variety of flowers that actually flower throughout the year, but they're all here together, rich on display, let's say, for everyone, that's conveying that sense of fertility and abundance in this reign, this golden age that Augustus promoted. There he is on the left, looking off to the left, with a couple of Flamen priests with their little pointy hats.
This video has been brought to you through a grant from the CAAS Marcantonio Award.